Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. If you didn't get the news, Fallen Empires Remastered is coming to Arena. It's going to affect all the formats, timeless, historic, standard. If you haven't seen the video, check out my standard top 10 for the cards that are going to impact standard the most. And it's going to have its own limited environment. So today, I'm going over black. And black, I believe, is the strongest overall color in Homelands Limited, and maybe in Homelands in general. We'll just take it from the top here with the Armor Thrall. Armor Thrall is a 1/3 body for 3. You can tap and sacrifice it to put a +1/+2 counter on target creature. So, already right off the bat, Armor Thrall is a good-sized body for this format. There are opposing 2/2s that you really want to be able to block. And a 1/3 also staves off a bunch of the little 1/1 tokens of the format. You know, it holds off opposing thralls, it holds off citizen tokens in white, it shuts down saprolings from green, or the Camerid tokens of blue. So it's already probably worth playing just as a 1/3 for 3. But on top of that, at instant speed, you can modify the power and toughness of another creature. So you can use this as a combat trick. It's, you know, an onboard trick, the opponent sees it coming, but still, just the threat of activation might mean that they are not able to block you. They might choose to do so to force you to use the Armor Thrall, but overall this is a fantastic creature, and I think this is a 3.0. I believe it always makes the cut. Might be a 3.5, because being able to modify the power and toughness of other things probably has some added value. Plus black has some synergy with thralls. So overall, just great card. Next up, we've got Basal Thrall. This is a 1/2 Thrall for 2 black. You can tap and sacrifice it to make 2 black. So this is a good fine body for limited, because again, if you need to be stopping 2/2s in the format, playing a Basal Thrall on 2 and a Basal Thrall on 3 means you've got a great double block lined up. The problem is 2 black mana means that unless you're monocolor, you're going to have a difficult time actually dropping this on turn 2 or 3. That's not to say you couldn't make a mono-black deck, but the problem is, black being one of the stronger colors in the format, you're probably going to be fighting other people for the black cards. And that means it's probably much more difficult to draft a mono-black deck, which is kind of offsetting how strong the black cards are. It's a neat tension that's built into the format. You know, so if for some crazy reason black was open and no one was taking it, you could probably make the best deck of the format. But since everyone's going to be keeping an eye on black, I think that makes Basal Thrall not quite as good. Again, this is a great card if you can play it on turns 2 and 3. And then the ability to ramp on mana could be amazing. So, you know, if you're in mono black, I think this card's like a 3.5. Always makes the cut, helps you ramp into your other spells, has Thrall synergies. But if you are a 2-color deck, or God forbid more than 2 colors, there's a lot of colored mana pips and a lot of synergy for being monocolored in Fallen Empires, so it'd be really hard to be 3 or more colors. Basal Thrall is not nearly as good in that situation, so to balance it all out, I think I will give this card a 2. The deck that is monocolor and really wants it, definitely really wants it. If you can't play this until, you know, turn 4 or turn 5 or later in the game, then it's not nearly as impactful at that point. You know, you don't need the mana ramp as much at that point either. Breeding Pit. This is an enchantment for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice this unless you pay 2 black, and at the beginning of your end step, you create a 0/1 black Thrall creature token. With modern cards, we're actually used to seeing things trigger at the beginning of combat or the beginning of your end step. This was pretty new technology at the time of Fallen Empires. I just wanted to let everyone know. Most cards didn't work this way. So it's neat that it pays you off, at least for the turn you play it, you get a Thrall token. Then you have to start paying 2 black on the upkeep to keep getting the Thrall tokens. So there are some good Thrall synergies that exist in Fallen Empires. There's a card that gives all of your Thralls +1/+1. If you get the Thrall champion, then that extra point of toughness on all of your little Thrall tokens means that you could use Torok's Gate to pump up their power even further. So how good the Breeding Pit is in your deck depends on how all in you are on the Thrall strategy. As long as making 2 black mana is not an inordinate cost for your deck, then at least it gives you a bunch of chump blockers. And that could be valuable in trying to ultimately blunt the offensive of like a white deck that's got a, Feral's Mantle or a Feralite Zealot. Those cards, you can't just let them in because white will just keep picking off your best creatures. So having a constant source of chump blockers is pretty good. I don't think this card's amazing. Sometimes it's hard to spare 2 black mana, but overall, I think Breeding Pit's a good, fine, playable card in the format, has good synergies with what black is doing, and I think it's about a 2.5. Daralore. So this is a 4/4 Thrall for 4. It's one of the more aggressively costed stat blocks of any creature in the format. And it says black spells you cast cost black more to cast. Now, that is a terrible downside, obviously. But if you were looking to, beat down the opponent, Daralore is one of the most aggressive plays, one of the best bodies of the format. It's hard to stop. The opponent's going to have to, double block you, triple block you. They're going to have to throw away resources to stop or trade with the Daralore. And if they do kill it, then, the drawback goes away. Now your black spells don't cost so much black mana. So Daralore is a pretty good beatdown plan for black. It's also a fantastic blocker. Blunts most of what the opponent's trying to do if they're swinging in. So, despite the drawback on this card, I think you still take it pretty highly. I think it's about a 3. Yeah, I think you play it, and you play it in multiples because if one of them dies, then you're pretty happy to deploy another one at that point. And if you've got, if you're a little flooded on swamps, then you don't care about playing them in multiples that much anyway. Ebon Praetor. The dreaded bunny rabbit coming to sacrifice the merfolk to the Ebon Praetor. We have a 5/5 Avatar Praetor for 6 mana. It has First Strike and Trample. Alright. That's, those are some stats for sure. That is a scary creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a -2/-2 counter on the Ebon Praetor. But you can sacrifice a creature to remove a -2/-2 counter from this. If it was a Thrall, it gets a +1/+0 counter. You only activate this during your upkeep and only once each turn. So basically at your upkeep you have this choice of whether you want to sacrifice a creature to pull the -2 counter off. If it's a Thrall, its power gets bigger. And its power getting bigger is a big deal because it has First Strike and Trample. Um, so Ebon Praetor is a really nasty top end for a Thrall deck. Um, it's a way that instead of going wide, you can try to go tall and have a game-ending threat on the field. If you're in the Thrall deck, then yeah, I think this is definitely an auto-include there. But if you're not in the Thrall deck, if you don't have, Breeding Pit and you don't have a good constant source of things to sacrifice, then the cost of getting this out, or the cost of it shrinking, is a big problem. So I have to temper my card rating a little bit because it's not always going to be in the perfect ideal deck. And sometimes that means you don't want it. So I think this card ranges between a 1.5 for the deck that doesn't really want it, all the way up to, I'm going to say, a 3.5 for the deck that does want it. You gotta jump through a lot of hoops, but it can end up being one of the scariest creatures in the format, if you can power it. Hymn to Torok, this is an amazingly powerful constructed card, but what about limited? So it costs 2 black mana, it's a sorcery, target player discards 2 cards at random. So, much like my commentary for the Basal Thrall, people are probably going to be fighting you for the black cards. That can mean it's more difficult to get the black mana that you need to play the cards early, which could really trip you up on whether or not you can cast the Hymn to Torok. So, and, there are cards like Initiates of the Ebon Hand that can filter your mana, but again, this is not a great creature to play in your deck because it has the 1 toughness problem and there are pingers in the format. So there are ways around the black mana issue, but still, if people are fighting with you for black and the best black deck you can make ends up having like a splash of another color or 2 colors, then Hymn to Torok's not going to look as good the more you water down the mana base with things that aren't swamps. So I think this card falls off a lot if you can't play it on turn 2 or turn 3 or even turn 4. I'm going to give this card a 2 if you're not sure about meeting your black mana requirements. But if you're monocolor, or if you have, a bunch of Initiates of the Ebon Hand, if you're pretty certain you can hit the black mana, then Hymn to Torok, at that point I think it goes up to about a 3. It doesn't win the game by itself, and eventually they just run out of cards in their hand, so future Hymn to Toroks don't do anything, but the ability to disrupt the opponent early and potentially make them discard their lands as early as turn 2 could be a gigantic problem, could be something that just wins you the game before it even starts. So have to respect that part of the card. Alright, Initiates of the Ebon Hand. This is a cleric. Oddly enough, they didn't choose to make it a human cleric. Its normal creature type is a bit mysterious. It's a 1/1 for 1 black. It has the activated ability of pay, colorless, like a generic 1, and you add black. If you activate the ability 4 or more times, then you sacrifice this at the beginning of the next end step. So, unless you really need the mana, don't do that. Just activate it 3 times and you're safe. So this card can help turn on the colored mana requirements of your black deck. Normally I would say that you don't want to play 1 toughness creatures in this format. It doesn't size up well against the things you really need to be blocking. And there are pingers in the format that can, just kill this thing. Acacian Javelineers and the Thorn Thallid. However, black is such a strong color that being able to play, Basal Thrall on 2 or Hymn to Torok on 2, or just making sure you hit like Mind Stab Thrall or Neckrite on turn 3, might be enough of an incentive that you run the Initiates of the Ebon Hand anyway, despite the fact that they don't play that well against the pingers of the format and such. Because of this mana filtering and how much you need it in black, I think I'd go ahead and give this a 2. You know, I can't rate it higher than that for being a 1/1 and the 1 toughness, but black is such a strong color that getting access to black is really good. So yeah, I'll give it a 2. Mind Stab Thrall. This is a 2/2 for 3. Whenever this attacks and isn't blocked, you may sacrifice it. If you do, defending player discards 3 cards. This one's not a random discard, but discarding 3 is always just painful. I don't think there's ever a time where discarding 3 doesn't impact the opponent meaningfully. So this is one of the creatures that you can set up with a red splash using Goblin War Drums to give this menace, or you can use Goblin Kites to give this flying. And the Goblin Kites doesn't matter that much in black, where you'd flip a coin and possibly sacrifice it at end of turn, because you're sacrificing it anyway. So that part doesn't matter. You can fly in the Mind Stab Thrall, sack it, they discard 3, and you don't care about the coin flip at the end of the turn for the Goblin Kites. So, again, there reaches a point in the game where the opponent's hand is empty, and then it's, you know, not that critical. But I still think this is a great way to disrupt the opponent early, and maybe, you know, just take away all their resources before the game's hardly started. So for that reason, I think this card is right around a 3. I think it always makes the cut. I think it's part of the core game plan of black. I don't think you pick it quite as highly as Neckrite, but I still think you pick it very highly, and I think it always makes the cut. Neckrite. So this is another common 2/2 Thrall for 2 black and 1. Whenever Neckrite attacks and isn't blocked, you may sacrifice it. If you do, destroy target creature defending player controls. It can't be regenerated, and regeneration is a thing that comes up in this set. So Neckrite's ability does matter. So this is one of the key pieces of black removal, and being able to give this menace or make it a flyer using a red splash in the deck is a key way to make sure that this gets through so you can kill the opponent's best thing. And sometimes what the opponent's best thing is will be obvious, and sometimes it'll be a little less obvious. You know, if the opponent has a Thallid, you know, which is just a 1/1, but you don't have a pinger, and it's got 2 counters on it, it's about to make another sap rolling token, maybe you decide that going ahead and taking that piece off the board before they start getting their long-term value from the Thallid is a better target than whatever else they have in play. Anyway, Neckrite is an amazing card. It hurts that you have to sacrifice it, unlike the white creatures that can damage the opponent's creatures and they don't have to sacrifice, but still Neckrite is part of your key core game plan. And you always have the option of not sacrificing it. You can just come in with a 2/2, and that's actually pretty decently statted for this format. So overall, I think this is a 3.5. Order of the Ebon Hand. This is a 2/1 Cleric Knight. Not human, doesn't give a creature type like that, just a Cleric Knight. It's a 2/1 for 2 black. It has protection from white, and that is relevant because not only does this mean, you know, can't be blocked or damaged or, you know, enchanted by white things, it means that white's pinger, the Icatian Javelineers, actually can't target the Order of the Ebon Hand. You still have to worry about Thornthallid from green, but it protects itself from one of the main pingers of the format, so I think it's a better card than a lot of other 1 toughness things. You may also pay a black to give it first strike until end of turn. It's very nice. And you can pay 2 black to give it a +1 power boost until end of turn. So this one, it's very black mana intensive. If you're in monocolor black, I think it's a good consideration. Again, it's poor in the green matchup because of Thornthallid, but it's fantastic in the white matchup. You'll just give white all kinds of fits if you get this on the battlefield. If you really want to run this card and black is just one of the colors of your deck, you'll probably want to prioritize taking Initiates of the Ebon Hand a little bit more highly. Overall, solid card. Because of the steep black mana requirements, I think I give this a 2.5. Soul Exchange. Uncommon, it's a 2 black sorcery. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you exile a creature you control. Then you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +2/+2 counter on that creature if the exiled creature was a thrall. Now, there's not a lot of ways to ensure that you can get a creature to the graveyard, but there's a couple of ways. There's like Dwarven Armorer in red that can make you discard cards, or there's the Draconian Silex, where you can discard cards at random to regenerate a creature. There are ways that you could try to engineer a situation where you can get the Soul Exchange, and one of the better targets is in blue. Blue has the Deep Spawn. It's a 6/6 trampler. It's not a rare, so it's more likely you'll actually see the Deep Spawn during the draft. And once you get the Deep Spawn on the battlefield, it'll start milling you 2 cards every upkeep, which means further Soul Exchanges are going to have more targets. They're going to have things in the graveyard to bring back. And finally, if you have Thralls that you're using, that Deep Spawn has Trample, which means the +2/+2 counter is doing great work for you. So this one requires some setup. It requires a bit of thought before you can just slap it into your deck. If you're just putting this into a black Thrall deck, then you'll probably find some time in the game to cast it eventually and get some use out of it. And again, if you're in the Thrall deck, getting the +2 counter will be pretty nice, probably worth the exchange. If you're not building the deck specifically for it, then I think this is somewhere around a 2. You're not embarrassed to play it. It can do some work for you. Don't know how many copies you would want, but you can craft the deck as a Reanimator deck more so. And if you're doing that, then this bumps up. Thrall Champion. This is a rare. It is a 2/2 Thrall for 5 mana. Black and 4 colorless. Thrall creatures get +1/+1. That's amazing. And you can tap to gain control of target Thrall for as long as you control Thrall Champion. This card is just an absolute bomb in black. Now, the opponent will be prioritizing some way to kill the Thrall Champion. They may have to line up a double ping in order to try to kill it. Or, take some other extreme measure. If they can't find a way, then all of your Thralls getting +1/+1 is a big problem. You might have a bunch of 0/1 Thralls that you've been piling up over the course of the game from a breeding pit. And then, once you get to 7 mana, because you have to pay 2 black on your upkeep to keep the breeding pit around. But once you get to 7 mana, and then you play the Thrall Champion, and all of those Thralls suddenly have, instead of being 0/1s, now they're 1/2s. That's a really good size for this format. And if the opponent happens to be in black, then you can just start stealing their thralls, and that would be backbreaking. So overall, this card is just amazing for black. I think this is a 4. Next up, we got Thrall Retainer. It's 1 black. It's an aura, enchant creature. The enchant creature gets +1/+1. So that can help you push in for combat damage and such. And there's not a lot of targeted removal in Fallen Empires. So there is some risk to putting an aura on your creature, but not as much as there usually would be. Plus, you can sacrifice the Thrall Retainer to regenerate the enchanted creature. So even if someone does point like a Goblin Bomb or whatever at the thing that has the Thrall Retainer, you can just sacrifice it to regenerate. So overall, this card is playable. It's a way that you can make one of your creatures difficult to stop. For example, if you're in black-white, then you could put this on like Feral Zealot or a creature wearing Feral's Mantle. And in both of those cases, it makes it harder to stop, in combat. But if it gets through, then it's a problem. Especially with a creature wearing Feral's Mantle, because then this is also boosting its power. You still can't play too many in a deck. I think it's a reasonable boost. It's a reasonable, not exactly a trick because it's sorcery speed, but I think it's around a 1.5. It's filler, but it's not bad filler. Next up, we got Thrall Wizard. This is a 1/1 for 3. Creature type, Thrall Wizard. You can pay a black and a colorless, counter target black spell unless that spell's controller pays black or 3 colorless. Since you can activate that ability multiple times, it is kind of a pain for an opposing black deck. And black doesn't necessarily have access to pingers. So I would call this a sideboard card. You don't know that the opponent's going to be a black deck when you first start playing, and just running out a 1/1 for 3 is a terrible idea. We'll just run headlong into Ication Javelineers or Thornthalid. But if you're sideboarding, you know the opponent has black and they don't have access to pingers, then yeah, you could side in the Thrall Wizard and be an enormous headache for the rest of the game anytime you got mana open. So I think this is a 0.5. Torok's Chant. Uncommon, enchantment, 2 black and 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this unless you pay black. Whenever a player puts a forest onto the battlefield, Torok's Chant deals 3 damage to that player unless they put a -1/-1 counter on a creature they control. Again, this is sideboard tech. If the opponent is green, or especially if they're mono green, then yeah, you would definitely sideboard this in against mono green. Otherwise, it's too narrow to main deck, especially with paying a black every upkeep. So this is a 0.5. Turok's Gate. 2 black, 1 colorless. It's an aura and enchants a land. You can sacrifice a Thrall at any time to put 3 time counters on this. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter from it. If there's no time counters, then you sacrifice it. So what's it do? You can tap the enchanted land, and attacking creatures you control get +2, -1 until end of turn. Activate only if enchanted land is untapped. So the -1 toughness is rough. That is a rough thing to have to play with. Black can do it. You've got some 1/2s and 1/3s and stuff. And if you play the Thrall Champion and pump up your other Thralls, then they could get in as well. At which point, a +2 power boost might just close out the game. So I don't think Torok's Gate is unplayable in black. You have some high toughness creatures, and you have ways of pumping your creatures otherwise. But whereas the Thrall Champion I would take very highly, Torok's Gate I would take pretty low. I don't know that you ever want it in multiples, and yeah, it can be an okay pump. You can only use it offensively, and it always makes your creatures more fragile. So I guess I go as a 2.0 on this card, just because it can help you to close out a game. But the second copy is far, far worse, like maybe a 0.5, and then it's like a 0 for any additional copies after that. And that brings us to the end of Black. Black's pretty straightforward and pretty powerful in this format. So the main question is, are you going to be fighting the other players for the black cards? And do you have a strategy to deal with the pingers of the format? So that's it for Black. It's pretty good. Join me next time. I'll be delving into red, then green, and finally we'll finish up with colorless and land. Until then, please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. It helps the channel a lot. And until next time, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy on this day of April the 1st.